only a little over a week out from the 2026 Missouri legislative session wrapping up. Two of those who were in Jefferson City for the duration, State Representatives Ann Kelly and Bob Bromley. Thank you both for going on the record with us. And I'll start with you. The 2026 legislative session, was it a good one? Was it a bad one?
You know, we got a lot of things accomplished. One of the couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head is the Purple Alert system. So anybody that has a disability that has strayed from home, we now will have a Purple Alert instead of just like a Amber Alert that you have for kids. So I think that's a good legislation. And another piece of legislation that we did that was successful is now if you want to get a divorce and you were pregnant, you can.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you brought that up. That's something maybe a lot of people in Missouri didn't know. Prior to this legislation, if a woman were pregnant and were seeking a divorce, that was something that couldn't be done.
Absolutely, and it's outdated laws that need to be fixed, and so we fixed it this legislative session. So those two, you might not think as being important, but they are important. And so we did get those things accomplished among other things. But I think those are the two highlights that I'd like to bring out.
Now, Bob, I did a little bit of research before you guys came on. I was reading your most recent Capitol report. One of the items you listed in your report was getting a balanced budget done on time. And I kind of followed along in the process. For the folks at home, that is a monumental undertaking by both chambers, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's hard to spend $50 billion and make sure it's all in the right places. And so many times we spend a lot of money and there's always a question mark on whether we spend it in the right places and who receives that money and what programs it supports. And so it's always difficult to do that. And everybody has their own ideas, and I'm no different. And I think Ann's the same way. We have our ideas. And the one thing that I think is always important is we always want to make sure we spend money for the people that need the help. And sometimes we question that, ourselves. But we look after the disabled, we look after the veterans, we look after senior citizens, and we put money there, but as always, there's never enough money in the budget.
Yeah, that's one of those things. In speaking with State Representative Dirk Deaton a few weeks ago, he said, you've got this big list of people that want something to eat, but only so much of the pie to go around. And
that's absolutely true.
I think it goes back to priorities. The state is really going to have to start looking at the priorities of the state and what those priorities are going to look like, because we're going to have to start making some hard decisions. We have made a few hard decisions this year, but they're going to have to make even more hard decisions next year.
One of the things about this legislative session, I want to ask you both, in the last few years there were some very heated moments, some very contentious moments. This year, it felt like things moved along very smoothly, not just in the House, but in the Senate as well.
I think we had two working chambers throughout the entire session. There are always those contentious moments that you may not see online or that you hear about in the news, because everybody's fighting for their bill to make it to the line, and not everybody's bill makes it to the line. So you have those behind the scenes, but through the public's eyes, we had two working chambers this year.
Bob,
well, I might just add that when you file 2,000 bills in the House, if you spent an hour on each one of them, you run out of time. And so a lot of being in the House and in the Senate is making sure that you try to hit the priorities and what the people really want. And I'm always frustrated at the end of every session that I didn't get all my bills, which were the best bills up there. I did get all of those done. But I also understand that everybody has priorities for their districts and their constituents. And so there's just a lot to be done up there. And some of the things that we really try to do is make sure the bad stuff doesn't get done.
Now, I want to talk about that for a moment. Things that didn't get done. And I'll just ask you each individually, if there was one item you wish had made it across the finish line this year, what was that?
So it would be my fentanyl bill that I was carrying for Laura Woody. It had been something that I went to the Stockton Walnut Festival, and she had a booth there, and she got my attention, and she told me about her son and about all the other fentanyl deaths in Missouri. And we've had a huge fentanyl push federally, and our governor has said some words about getting rid of fentanyl and stuff. And so we really hoped that this was the year that we could get something done for fentanyl awareness, but it just didn't get done. So that would be my one I wish we could have got done.
Now, it didn't get done this year, but is the door open for it to be
Oh,
done in the
absolutely,
future?
absolutely. You just have to find somebody to file the bill, right?
And I want to come back to that in just a moment. Bob, same question for you. If there's one item you wish had made it across the finish line.
So actually, I'm going to narrow it down to two. So I'm going to just double up on you. But one of them is House Joint Resolution 115. And that would have allowed the people to vote on whether disabled veterans, if you were 100% disabled, whether you would have a property tax relief on that. And that's been, I've worked on a lot of veteran issues, and that was a bill that Dave Griffith had filed. He's chair of the Veterans Committee. And he has filed that for 7 or 8 years. It's made progress, but we made it out of the House, I think 153 to 2 vote.
So I think this is the first year. So I filed it my first 2 years.
Yep.
And then Dave's like, why don't you just let me handle it? And this is the first year that it actually got through the House, that it was actually called up to the floor and passed out of the House. So we thought, well, maybe this is the year. I mean, it's just letting the people vote on whether or not they want to give veterans or disabled veterans a relief, right, with their property taxes.
And I think ultimately, why I'm so disappointed in that is if you can't provide relief for disabled veterans, I think that's a very sad part of our process up there. And so the Senate did not take that up. Hopefully they'll take that up in future. And the other thing that I was really disappointed in, none of us like going to the Department of Motor Vehicle Registration office. And I filed a bill for an option to get a 5-year license registration. And you know, we can get a 1 and 2 year now. And so it passed out of the House 143 to 0, but the Senate did not take it up. And so I was personally a little bit upset about that, but I also understand that there's a lot of time for that, you know, to take place. So those would be a couple things that I really was pushing for.
And I think that's maybe something that the folks at home may not realize. A lot of times when you see bills make it across the finish line, that's not the first year that they've been in either chamber. And a lot of work goes in behind the scenes into making sure that those bills get to that point where it heads to the governor.
Absolutely. So I had one bill, and it wasn't necessarily my bill, but my bill was on the Senate bill. And it was the last week we were in conference. And generally, whenever your bill has been sent to conference, so for the people at home to know, that's when the two chambers do not agree, or there's been amendments added and they want to go to conference to strip some of those amendments off. So once it goes to conference, though, you have a pretty good chance of getting that bill across the line. But it's just what's going to stay on that bill. And so I was fighting for my stuff. And so through the political realm of things, how you do things, I was able to get it stopped. But my idea was not to kill the bill, because the original bill was a good bill. And so the last day of session, I called the bill sponsor, I called the floor leader in the House, and I said, hey, can we just strip everything off of this? I know it's gonna kill my stuff on there. It's gonna kill a lot of people's stuff. But to me, it should not kill the underlining bill. So I waited the very last day. So it was in the Senate possession. So the Senate sent it back over to us. We stripped everything off of it and we got it passed. So sometimes it's worth the underlying bill to get passed to kill your own stuff.
And again, I brought this up a moment ago about not closing the door for the future. For the folks at home, Missouri does have term limits, and you guys have reached the 8-year mark in the House. With the legislation that didn't make it across the finish line, is that something you're willing to work with that next generation of state reps to see if you can get it across?
Absolutely. So I have a teacher education bill for teacher training. So what it does is it makes, instead of all the teacher training have to happen every single year at the very beginning of school year, it would allow more flexibility for the administrators to administer that training. And so I'm already planning on having it drafted up electronically and sending it to prospective people that's in the chamber already that's going to be coming back saying, hey, can you file this for me? Will you file this? And doing the same thing over in the Senate. And then, of course, hopefully my state representative that represents me would also be able to file that bill for me too also.
Yeah, those relationships, I think that's something that most people don't realize. You've formed all these relationships in Jefferson City with people all across the state, and the door is now open for the future to work on stuff.
Yeah. And I think really if you're really wanting to pass something, being outside, trying to advocate for a bill is probably, I don't know what Bob thinks, but you can probably get something done a lot faster by being the outside person looking in, because especially if you have the time and you have the perseverance to get that bill across the line.
Well, I think what a lot of people don't understand is we pre-file bills starting in December, and a lot of times you will look through the last year's bills that were filed, and some of those you may already know about, and they may have interested you, and you may just go ahead and pick up on a bill, and I may call somebody if they ask me about my 5-year license plate bill again. They may call me and I'll talk to them and tell them maybe why I think it didn't make it through the Senate and give them some pointers, because somebody else will want to pick that up, obviously. And I think there's a lot of work that goes on before you go into session and a lot of work that goes on after you get out of session. And it's very common for people to, basically do a review afterwards on what happened to that bill. And so I think there would be people willing to look at some of those next year, and they'll have their own bills and maybe want to modify that slightly.
I'm glad you brought that up. When we think about the legislature, you see the House floor, you see the Senate floor, but I know when I first started covering politics, you don't realize how much time is spent in committee, how much time is spent, whether it's in Jefferson City or at home, combing through stuff, doing research, talking to folks. Is that time spent doing all that something either of you will miss? Don't answer too quickly.
So I will say there's nothing like putting in 200 or 300 or 400 hours on some legislation and then it not getting passed. And so sometimes I think we will miss that, but maybe in a not a good way. We'll miss it, or we'll miss it in a good way, not having to do that. And
sure.
Because most of us automatically, when you file a bill, we support that. We think that it's great, and we find out pretty quickly some of that is not so great according to everybody else. And so I think I will miss the work that we put in behind the scenes, and that's the stuff that most people don't get to see.
And if there wasn't term limits, we'd be still doing the same thing over and over, and we wouldn't think anything else of it, because it's pushing our legislation that we are filing for our constituents, and that's all it is serving. But since we know it's our last session, I'm ready to be done. I'm done with the politics. I'm ready to figure out what's next. I love the service. I love serving my constituents. I love helping them get resolution to their problems. But the Capitol, no, I'm done.
One thing I might mention is, people think that we go up there and we just, dream this stuff up on our own. I've never filed a bill that somebody didn't bring to me, one of my constituents or somebody, and you may get a call, and I look at it as lobbyists have a bad name sometimes, but I look at it as I am lobbying for my constituents back home. And so I am the only lobbyist they have up there. And when they have an issue or a problem, it could be something Department of Revenue isn't doing right. It could be something that, one time my neighbor said, I don't know why I can't get a permanent tag on my boat because I get one on my trailer. And you start filing bills like that. And so most of the things that we file up there, they're not something we just wake up in the morning and go to the office and say, oh, maybe we should do that. It's because we're trying to fix a problem for a constituent back home.
And as sad as it is, it's also the reason why it's more difficult to get those bills passed, because there's not a lobbyist behind those bills, because we become the lobbyists. We become the ones pushing it. So that's why if you have constituents that can come and testify and can kind of help push that idea, it makes it more plausible that it could possibly pass.
Yeah, a state representative I knew years and years ago made the comment, when they say citizen legislature, it's not just that the citizens make up the legislature, but the citizens can participate in that legislative process. And that sounds like what you two are saying.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think one thing that a lot of people do, they forget that once a bill passes out of committee, there is no more public input, official public input. The only place that citizens can come up and testify is in committee. And if there's a bill that's pertinent to certain people or certain groups, we try to get that word out that we want people coming up to advocate for themselves and to help us get that bill through committee, because once it gets to the committee, then I am the lobbyist on the floor to try to get that legislation passed. And so that's where I think the committees are much more important than any other process in this, the whole process up there, because that is where you get the citizen input.
Now we're closing in on the back half of the show here. Something I want to ask you both about, since we've talked about terming out of office. Looking back on the last 8 years, what are you most proud of?
Well, I'll go first.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I'm really proud that I've got such a good working relationship with all the people back home. And that does not come easy sometimes, because everybody doesn't like everything that you do. And I think the most important thing is make sure you have open discussions. There's certain things you can support, certain things you can't, support. And, some things you just downright disagree with. And there's going to be 10 or 15 or 20% of the people that will disagree with everything you do. And they're the ones that sometimes are the most vocal that I don't represent them. And I just asked them, I said, I've got 80% of the people over here that I do represent. I represent you, but you just don't like what I'm representing. And so, but there's ways to do that. You don't have to be negative on that. You just need to explain it. And we all take some difficult votes up there sometimes that people don't understand why you did it. And I just, before I vote on anything, I make sure that I have it in my own mind. I have my own reasoning down on why I did that, so I can explain it to the people back home.
So it has just been an honor to serve in District 127. And I think the one thing that I'm most proud of is always being available, always being willing to talk to people, answering my phone call, answering my email, and being the representative who is willing to communicate with my constituents. There are lots of representatives that don't answer their phone, that don't answer their emails. And I take pride that I'm the one doing that. And I agree with Bob, you can't appease everybody. And those I don't take lightly, but I know that there are some answers that we just can't have a positive answer to. And that's unfortunate sometimes. But I think my constituent work is what I'm most proud of. And now I've done some good legislative issues that I've got passed to. With COVID and all the things with the school districts, I did the AMI day, even though some people don't like AMI days. School districts would not have been able to do a lot of things during COVID if they did not have those AMI days. And I know kids don't necessarily like making up days whenever it's 90 degrees outside and it's the end of May, they're ready to be done. And sorry, as a former teacher, I know there's very little educating kids whenever it's the end of May and it's 90 degrees outside. They're ready to be done. So if we can do that throughout the year, I think that was good legislation.
One of the things that strikes me about the legislature is sometimes it's going, oh, we didn't realize we needed this, now we're setting ourselves up for the future. And I've heard people mention AMI days set us up for the future. Should anything come up, we have this as an option now.
Right, yeah. Isn't that cool?
Well, I'm glad we didn't have it when I was in school, but either way, as a parent myself, I do think it is an excellent resource for school districts. Let's turn the question around to the other side. Is there something you wish you had gotten accomplished in the last 8 years that just didn't get to or didn't come to fruition?
So I really think one of the things we did, I chaired the Utilities Committee. We worked on broadband throughout the state. And I think, just everybody having high-speed internet in the entire state, we went through and we worked on a process with that to make sure. We spent a lot of money in the state of Missouri. But we realized during COVID that, kids did need to learn from home. We've got people buying things online. But what is really, when it comes to economic value of the internet now, if you can imagine having a small convenience store in northern Missouri at a junction where you don't have high-speed internet and you can't take debit cards and credit cards and things of that nature. And so we've really been good in Missouri the last few years of getting broadband to about 90% of the people in the state. And I just wish we could have got that to every citizen in the state. And so that's one thing that I would have liked to have seen us be able to do.
Well, let me follow up with that. Do you feel like the work that was done has set up the next legislature to take it across the goal line?
So I think so, but the hardest thing with internet is some of those people out of the last mile. So when you're way out in the woods someplace, and it's very difficult for somebody without a lot of federal grant money or state grant money to put fiber optics to the last 1,000 feet out to somebody's house. And so, and I think part of that gap would be filled because of satellite internet now, and the price of that is coming down. So people without really good access by actual buried cables, they will probably get that through the satellite internet from now on.
So mine's not as big. As a former teacher, I'd mentioned teacher training before, and that's something that I've been carrying every single year since I've been up here in Jeff City. And it's something that everybody was supportive of, and it only affected teachers. But we harp on and the teachers and education over and over and over, and it was just something that we could give back to them, saying, we appreciate you. We understand how much stress you're going through. We understand how precious the time that the first couple of weeks of school is. We want to give you your time back by allowing more flexibility. I really hoped that we could have got it across the finish line today, or this year, so that we could, give that back to them. But unfortunately, it didn't get done. Another thing that we should have got done this year that we did not is property tax relief for our constituents. We were so close. It was in conference, and it just didn't make it out of conference.
Since you brought up property tax relief, there has been some speculation that Governor Kehoe may call a special session later this year for that. Have either of you gotten any indication whether that may be?
So that will be completely up to Governor Kehoe and what he does.
I would hate to even speculate on that because first, before they would do that, they would have to get a good feeling on whether or not that would even pass. And so, he's probably doing some research on that. He still has until, I think, is it July 1st until he has to either sign bills or veto bills and that. And so some of the stuff that didn't get passed, whether he wants to come back in and do that or not, it'd just be strictly up to him.
We're just about out of time, but Ann, I want to go back to two words you mentioned a moment ago. What's next? So moving forward, what do you see for yourselves?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not retired like Bob. I started looking at the ages of the people in the House of Representatives, and you have your really young ones who haven't really started their career, or it's going to be really easy whenever they finish their 8 years to get a job. Then you have the middle of the road, which is what I call myself, and then you have the ones that are just going to retire.
Yeah, really.
So it seems really difficult for the middle of the road people to find the next position, right? Because it's the middle of their life. I know God has a plan. I know the plan is beyond anything that I could expect. I'm trusting in Him.
And with me, I was retired when I got elected, and I'm going to go back to retirement. I've got 8 grandchildren, and one on the way in July, and so I imagine going and seeing grandkids and traveling a little bit will take up most of my time.
I was going to say 9 grandkids. That may keep you busier than the legislature.
Well, it does keep me busy, but it also keeps me broke because my wife loves to buy for them.
All right, we're just about out of time. I have one last question for each of you. Advice for the next person to head to the legislature?
I think the most important thing that the next representative needs to know is it's not about political ambition. It's about serving your constituents and making sure you're doing what you can to serve them.
And I think I would just say that you really need to stay true to yourself. And a lot of times it's very easy to be swayed in a lot of different ways. And as long as you're doing the things that are true to you and you keep your values in that, there's always going to be people that can second guess you, but you have to live with yourself every day.
Absolutely.
All right, well, State Representatives Ann Kelly and Bob Bromley, thank you for going on the record with us.
Thank you.